All right. I'm recording now.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to solve the live issue. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a pre-recorded discussion Kirk and I are having now that you should have been able to watch if COVID-19 had not ruined 2020 for everyone. So with me is my best friend from childhood, Mr. Kirk L. Johnson. Kirk, where are you tonight?
I am live in the cave at Shelbyville.
Or I should say you were live because we've pre-recorded this live event that we
pre-recordedly live.
So we're actually not even real right now. We're real, but when people watch this, like we won't.
When will then be now?
Now.
Okay.
So we're in now, but people watching now will have seen us now then, but we're now.
Makes perfect sense.
Now as they're watching, we were then, but we would have been now with them. So.
Yes.
All right. Man, well, if 2020 couldn't have got any weirder, you know what? I'm sure 2020 is saying, hold my beer. So I would imagine this is the least weird thing that 2020 is going to do. Maybe even tonight. Who knows, right? The day is young.
I mean, I'm still waiting for Godzilla to show up.
Even so, come quickly, Lord Jesus. I think that would be helpful if Godzilla would come and just end it. So it is Wednesday the 24th, and we're going to post this on, I guess, our Facebook pages. We'll see if it even processes. We'll have to keep it. Let's try to keep it at 30 minutes. We'll talk short. Maybe that'll help. I don't know. So we were going to do this. We're going to do some live stuff, and we're going to try to do it all summer. I don't know if we're going to do it weekly or bi-weekly. I think bi-weekly is reasonable. I think monthly is reasonable. I don't know if weekly is reasonable, but we should definitely do it more than once, right?
Oh, I agree.
And if you can make a comment below or however you do that, we probably would need some advice on what it should be called. Nerd speak sounds derivative. Geek talk sounds derivative. We thought red shirts. Red shirts is kind of funny.
But it might have been used.
Yeah, and it's 2020, so that would make sense. Red shirts. We'd be killed by the end of this. What was the other one you had when we were talking earlier that it could be called?
Fandumbs.
Fandumbs. Yeah, and can it be D-U-M-B-S? Fandumbs.
Probably.
I think that'd be the way to go.
It's all in the spelling, yes.
It's in the spelling.
It's all in the spelling.
All right, well, Facebook friends and amigos. So we're going to talk some nerd talk. So Kirk reached out to me this summer and said, we need to talk. And I said, I agree because COVID's driving me crazy. We're going to talk the state of fandom a little bit this summer and nerd and geek and popular culture. Tonight we're going to take on, we've narrowed it down to just 2 items, and I think what we'll do is we'll do more discussion this summer. So tonight we're going to talk about Star Wars and Star Trek. So I guess Star Wars would be a force choke. That'd be its symbol, or this, and then this would be the universal Star Trek. Would that be fair?
Fair.
Okay.
Okay.
Before we start, I know you got a big question. I'm going to ask a series of questions from you. All right. What is your earliest memory of being a Star Trek fan?
Well, happy back in the 80s watching the original series. Because, see, it was still in syndication back in the 80s. And then, like watching the movies like Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock. So I think I've actually seen every Star Trek movie in the theater except for the last Next Generation movie.
Where I don't know, is a spoiler alert to say Data dies?
Yeah, I didn't watch that one in the theaters because And then when I watched it, I was like, wow, it's not even a really good Wrath of Khan remake. Yeah. So, that's the only one I've missed then.
Okay, I saw that one.
And I've seen every Star Wars in the theater, including the original when I was less than a year old.
Yeah, I believe I saw it too. I know I saw it when it was back to theaters after its first run. I know that. New Hope. Okay, Kirk, let's settle this before we get our discussion tonight. Star Wars or Star Trek? Why do people think you got to pick one or the other?
I think it's with anything. It's with any choice. It's the same thing with Marvel versus DC. people are like, well, you have to be one or the other, but it's like, well, I like both for different reasons. Now, I probably say I like Star Trek better than I like Star Wars, and I think you're kind of the opposite.
Yeah, fair.
But I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, people, it's like you always have to make that choice, artificial or not, because it's almost like sports. Like, okay, I'm a Cubs fan, you're a Cards fan, so therefore there has to be that. Otherwise, I think if everybody liked everything, thered be no basis for arguments.
That's true. Speaking of baseball, one of the exciting things about COVID is that the Cardinals are undefeated and the Cubs have yet to win a game. So I'm really happy.
Yeah.
Really happy about that for COVID and the Cardinals. Yeah, I think the choice between Star Wars and Star Trek is, to me, not too different from saying, would you like a T-bone steak or ribs? And my point is, I'll just have both. I don't understand how that's a choice between good or bad. That's just a choice between great and great. Yeah, and Pepsi's the same as Coke. I know that's probably going to lose us some friends, me saying that. I don't know.
Look, I can't believe you.
Look, both will take out your teeth in your 40s and give you diabetes, so what does it matter which one you do?
That's true. That's true.
Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about a really interesting discussion that you want to have, and then we're going to wrap up the discussion with some thoughts about fandom. So why don't you start with your big thought that we've been chewing on?
So if you were approached by CBS and by Lucasfilm or Disney, and you could actually run whatever you wanted to do in either Star Trek or Star Wars, which would you choose? Would you do a Star Wars TV show, a Star Wars trilogy, a Star Trek TV show, or a Star Trek trilogy of movies?
Okay, that's a great question. And I assume you'll get to answer that too. Is that fair?
Yes, I already have my answer, actually.
Okay. All right, so first off, I'll just say this. I think that both entities have had a lot of good choices and a lot of missteps over the last 20 plus years. And so I think that while I would enjoy doing something with Star Trek, I thought of it today. I would actually want to do a Star Wars show, and I wouldn't do a film, just because I think that the film medium is so difficult to wield right now. I do a show. Here's what I would do. I thought of it. So I would try to push for a retelling of the Clone Wars, post-Clone Wars in a live-action version. So I would go for Darth Vader hunting down the Jedi.
Okay.
Not yet as in the suit. Not yet in the suit. So Padme is still alive. Luke and Leia are very, very young and have to be protected, basically. So they're very young in this. Ewan McGregor still wants to play Obi-Wan Kenobi, according to every report. And Hayden Christensen, I thought, was a fine actor. I just think he had a bad script. And that's what I would do. I would do a 3-season, and I'd pitch it like they did Avatar Airbender. They say, we're going to tell it in 3 seasons. We're going to have a beginning, a middle, and end. We're not going to do anything after 3 seasons. And in the middle of the 3rd season, the cliffhanger would be he gets the suit. And the back half of the 3rd season is now he is in that suit.
So you kind of almost redo episode 3 completely.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I'd reboot episode 3. I'd reboot episode 2 and 3.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I got you. All right. Fair enough.
Yeah. That's what I would do.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
So now, do you not want to do the movies because of the inherent pressure and insanity of Star Wars fans?
Yes, we'll talk about that in a bit. Yeah, and to be honest, movies, if you really look at it, and by the way, how funny is it? Hindsight's 2020. I remember when Netflix came out and they were mailing stuff in the mail. You were one of the first persons I knew who just thought Netflix was going to be a game changer, and I thought it was insane. And honest, hand to whatever demigod I have to swear to. you very early told me this was going to be a big game changer, and I was like, stuff by mail. What are you talking about? Of course, I don't think either of us foresaw the streaming service.
No.
But that world of streaming has rendered, I think, somewhat traditional movie making a little neutered in its mass effect in the ways that streaming shows. You think of the success of things like Mandalorian, or how Breaking Bad was floundering, and once Breaking Bad went streaming, a whole group of people discovered it, and then it just blew up. Or things like Stranger Things that comes on just for a flash, or even the work that Marvel had done with like Punisher and Jessica Jones and Luke Cage and Daredevil, where it was just so culturally, the phenomenon was so amazing. I think that if you wanted to reboot a Star Wars and focus still on the Skywalker story, that's what I would do. I would do just a 3-season Anakin story, and maybe call it non-canon, but just reinvent and try a different version of his myth, and give him stuff that he wasn't given.
Oh yeah, like a story. The sticky plot things. Oh, they're so important.
Yeah, and make sure it's after the Clone Wars, so the Clone Wars has come to an end, and be very clear that Anakin and Owen are brothers, that he had grown up on a farm, that when Obi-Wan.
Oh, you're changing the whole segment.
Yeah. I'm gonna do just a total reboot, but I'm gonna call it a Star Wars myth or something. So I won't even try to sell it as a rewriting. I'll just sell it as like what GT does with Elseworlds.
Right. Just whatever you do, get rid of the rule of 2. Just get rid of the rule of 2.
That's fun. That's fun. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So that's what I'm going to do. What are you going to do? You can do a Star Trek or Star Wars movie, new trilogy, or you can do a Star Trek or Star Wars show. Where are you going to go?
Star Trek show. Because I've gone back, actually, I've recently watched some of DS9, some of Enterprise. I've watched Discovery, and even I haven't watched all of the first season of Picard, but I've watched about the first half of it or so. I want to do an actual Star Trek story where the good guys have to face the choices for essentially defending their morality. Because the way that Star Trek has always done it is the main characters are always right, and everybody else around them or their superiors go off and do the bad things, like the Starfleet commander from Into Darkness. He went and got Khan, and he was doing all this stuff behind their back, so they never had to make that decision. But it would be kind of interesting to have a show where they're kind of forced to make those decisions for themselves, rather than having the easy way out of, okay, well, this guy's obviously doing something bad, so I get to be the hero. And I think actually, so that way it's kind of maybe a little bit grittier than what you would normally get from a Star Trek show. But I think it would be rather interesting just to kind of explore those ideas of, what happened, what would happen if you go one way, or what happens if you go the other way.
Are we going early Federation? Are we going pre-Pike?
Honestly, you could just about set it. You could just about set it anywhere, really. I mean, you could go pre, like, original series, like what they're doing with stuff now, or you can even do post even Next Generation, because the whole Romulan thing. Because again, the Star Trek Online game has progressed the story after that. And they've kind of done some interesting things, but it would, it's one of those things that the nice thing about Star Trek is you can kind of set it whenever, because it's a lot of the same universal themes throughout, so it's a lot easier to deal with.
Now, how many seasons you want to do? What are you thinking? I want to do 3 because I think there's shows and things that if you go too long, it really doesn't work. I think Avatar Airbender demonstrated that less is more if everyone just holds to their guns and does less.
Right. Well, again, I would probably try to set it up maybe 4 to 5. Again, Babylon 5, one of my favorite sci-fi TV shows of all time, right up there with Star Trek to me. It was originally set up to be 5 seasons, and they got the 5 seasons, but they thought they weren't going to get it, so they kind of wrapped everything up at the end of 4. But to be able to tell that story over 5 seasons, I think is, because again, you have a whole arc of what you're trying to do.
Let's talk about why we chose what we chose. You kind of got into it, which is a perfect segue. So Star Trek and Star Wars share a common, I don't know what the word would be, but a common feature where they can exist on multiple platforms. So you have novels. I know you were huge into the Star Wars novels. They have television series. Star Wars got a little late to that game, but they joined it. Well, not really. I mean, they did a Christmas special that was on television. A lot of people forget that.
I was going to say, I still don't think you could talk about that. I think that's illegal.
They even had Star Wars had spinoff series. They had the Ewok specials, where Wicket and company would always go off on their Lord of the Rings adventures on Endor. Star Wars had an animated, or Star Trek had the animated with the original actors, which I know.
Yes, that is actually technically considered season 4 of the original series.
Yeah, and Leonard Nimoy, if I remember right, the reason everyone got their jobs is Leonard Nimoy said, "I won't make it if you don't give everyone I work with their roles," because they knew without Spock, there's no Star Trek at that point.
Yes.
So multiple platforms, games, video games, novels, graphic novels, television, film, the whole gauntlet. You could even say albums if you count William Shatner's.
No, we're not. No.
Doing Rocket Man to the music.
I think Leonard Nimoy did one as well.
That's right. And by the way, crossover. I did some music about Bilbo Baggins, if I'm not mistaken, too.
That is true.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about our love of these wonderful bodies of art, popular culture and art. What is the essential part of it? Because I think one of the things that modern fandom, this could be a good segue to that. One of the things that modern fandom seems to struggle with is ownership of creative properties that they did not create. And so then the question, so I told you this, I had this discussion with a Trekkie, and I told him I loved Star Trek. I didn't understand why we're having the discussion, but he knew I loved Star Wars. Most people, when they meet me, they realize he really loves Star Wars.
No, I don't get that from you at all.
Yeah, Darth Vader is with Gizmo back there, and then Darth Vader's looking over the two of them, and the Falcon just shot across. And he said, "Oh, you Star Wars fans with your optimism," and I said, "Excuse me, Star Trek is a utopian version where all the races and ethnicities of Earth literally no longer matter because the Federation is considered one human race. And they seem to have solved everything: racism, sexism, economics, politics.
Pretty much any ism you got.
Now they're all on a ship, good ship Lollipop, and they're literally, now it's humans are the one, and what was interesting was the different alien species substituted for racial and ethnic differences. And I said, that, and I said, so you're into that? He goes, oh, okay, good point. So, all right, Star Wars, Star Trek. Which belongs in sci-fi? Which belongs in myth, and why?
Again, I think kind of if you look at it, I think Star Trek is more sci-fi because it is. I mean, they're both space operas, but I think Star Trek is a little bit more in the sci-fi, and I think Star Wars is more of sci-fi fantasy. Just because, again, Star Wars, depending on who you talk to, is depending on the meaning. Star Trek definitely it commentates on current what's going on at the time, more so than Star Wars. Star Wars kind of has it's got an arc, it's got a story arc. I always looked at it as supposed to be the rise, redemption, the rise, fall, and redemption of Anakin Skywalker with 3 movies at the end. rather than Star Trek, which never really had a central narrative running through it.
No.
So it was always more of an episodic. It was designed to be episodic rather than necessarily tell one story all the way through.
And what's interesting is it seemed like Star Trek movies did better when they got away from that and went ahead and just did what Star Wars did. I think of Wrath of Khan as being a really excellent Star Trek movie that had to lean heavily into the Star Trek mythos with Khan,
Right.
Kirk, and Kirk dealing with his anxiety about getting old, you know. His
But I think also if you go back, and I recently rewatched the motion picture, and everybody, you know, I kind of watched it and I'm like, you know what? A lot of that's also there. I think it, you know, granted, you know, the special effects weren't that great. And, you know, the whole, you know, V'ger thing, which was kind of interesting. But yeah, if you look at the interplay of some of the characters, like, you know, it's really not that bad. You know, it's not by far Star Trek V, you know, Kirk versus God, but, you know, hey, whatever.
Yeah. Well, look, for every Kirk versus God, there's a Gungan waiting to up in your stuff in Star Wars. So both of our beloved franchises have their Achilles heel and kryptonite, don't they?
Yeah.
I think that Star Wars definitely probably has more in common with Lord of the Rings than it does with Star Trek, except it's set in outer space. In that it's often a hero's journey. I think that's probably where they struggled in the sequels, was unpacking who was going to be the hero. It seemed like Finn was going to be the hero, which I thought was bold and wonderful. And then it became Rey's story, which I didn't personally mind. I know some fans got mad and thought of her as a Mary Sue, and they didn't like what they perceived to be the social justice voice in Star Wars. But I thought it would have been a better story with Finn being the sort of main character the way Luke was. Now, prequels, that's the hard one, because I think it would have been better if it had just been Obi-Wan's story and not Anakin's, because Anakin was fated to become Darth Vader.
Well,
so how's he a central character if he's going to fall?
Again, the thing with the prequels, and I've said this before, is that you gotta walk into it and you gotta say, okay, I'm either going to tell the story as everybody knows what's going to happen, or I'm going to tell the story as nobody knows what's going to happen, even though they know that's what's going to happen. And I think they would have been better off going, nobody knows what's going to happen, because the problem is there were winks and nods and nudges and, you know, little how's your father going, you know, all through it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it actually ever took itself as seriously. Now, I've also heard that rumor has it from some of the people that were on the set that basically it was a way for Lucas to play with the sci-fi and with the effects, and he didn't really care that much about the story, which you can kind of tell at times, but who knows?
But that's consistent with what people said about the first film, 3 films, that he didn't care about story. He was just literally inventing things, but he had surrounded himself with storytellers who did care about that. You know, he got tapped into Frank Oz and some of the hints and stuff.
And Kasdan.
Yeah, Lawrence Kasdan and some different people who he brought in. Okay, Star Trek. I agree with you. I think that Star Trek, I think good sci-fi, Kirk, speaks to issues. I thought things like Battlestar Galactica was the perfect post 9/11 sci-fi about us versus them. Thought it was brilliant. Now, I don't think it did well as it raced to the finish line.
Well, again, that was because that was a sci-fi thing.
Yeah.
Sci-Fi Channel was like, oh, well, we want you to do a season, and we're going to wait like a year and a half before we show it. And the creators were like, no, we're just going to cut it off right here. So that, again, sci-fi shoots itself in its own foot more than anything. So it's like they're like Chris Farley and Tommy Boy. You know, they get the little sail and they love it, and then they destroy it. So they've done that with like every decent show they've ever had.
Yeah. Oh, if Chris Farley had been in Shrek, what a different world that had been. Huh? Speaking of sequels, so
The Farley Jedi.
Kirk, Star Trek. Okay. Next Gen seemed to really connect with audiences. The original, obviously, probably did. You know, it didn't connect with audiences at the beginning. We know. But we do know it made a big impact. So socially and culturally in this country and abroad, it really was a game changer. Maybe producers were short-sighted. Thankfully, Lucille Ball wasn't. She probably isn't talked about enough for making that happen. I watched an interview with Nichelle Nichols, Uhura. I say her name right? Nichelle? Yeah. Uhura, and she said she was going to leave the show. And Gene Roddenberry stopped her and said, will you think about this over the weekend? And she went to an NAACP event, and Martin Luther King was there. MLK was there. And met her and told her, this is the only show we let our kids watch and our family watch past hours. And she said, oh, I'm going to miss doing the show. And he literally stopped her from getting off the show because at that point, the work he was doing was so crucial to African Americans getting representation. And she said he literally talked me into staying with the show because I didn't, I just didn't get, what I was doing. And I had other opportunities. And he said, oh, this is what I need my kids seeing, is that Black women will go to outer space and be competent and confident. And she told Roddenberry that Monday, apparently, and he just stopped and said, that's exactly what I'm trying to do with the show. MLK got Roddenberry. And so I think sci-fi always speaks to the times. Now, what do you think was the challenges with some of the more, I don't want to say current, but Voyager, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, and now the new Star Trek? Beyond the fandom, has it struggled to find those good, strong metaphors of speaking to the zeitgeist?
Well, it's funny because you're talking about Voyager, and yet Voyager is hugely popular with a lot of fans. Not us, but there are a lot of fans out there that love Voyager because, again, it was groundbreaking, female captain, and some different things with that. But to me, I had problems with it from a reality perspective. I mean, I'm there to suspend disbelief, but when you blow up the ship every week and it comes back the next week and it's fine, and and some of the interpersonal dynamics of that show I didn't really like, because now Roddenberry, apparently one of the problems that a lot of the writers had was Roddenberry had a rule that the bridge crew could not have arguments. That was why, it never happened on the original series. That was why it rarely ever happened until later, even in Next Generation. But they tried to do that same thing on Voyager, and it didn't make sense because the whole setup for it was you have two disparate groups of people who were, one was chasing the other one, and they're rebels, and it's like, oh, well, we're across the galaxy. Oh, we're all just going to get along now. So it didn't make any logical sense.
Yeah.
I think the problem with Enterprise, was I don't know that they really had a good. I think they were just kind of, okay, we're just going to kind of go and see what happens because we need another Trek show. Because they have said that basically it was one of those where they kept having to try to come up with new shows. So they did Enterprise, and I don't think they actually really thought about where they wanted to go with it. Because one thing I will say about Discovery that I've liked so far is every season is a separate story. They've done 2 seasons, but both of them, and again, it was much like Babylon 5, where, okay, we're going to tell a story, we're going to have a season story and then an overarching story, but it works. And Deep Space Nine was kind of the change where they were like, okay, let's stay in one spot and let's tell a longer term story. And I think a lot of that, I don't know, I guess it was people didn't like that. They wanted to be on the ship moving around. I love Deep Space Nine. It's probably my second favorite show outside of it's. I mean, for Star Trek stuff, it's original series, Deep Space Nine, then even Next Generation.
Yeah. Yeah, you've always been a fan of Cisco, and Cisco's gotten a lot of love, I would say, in the last couple decades as a captain. A lot of people seem to really gravitate to him. He was very un-Picard-like, and certainly wasn't Kirk. He was his own man.
Yeah, he was very much. It was kind of interesting because he kind of started off as kind of that milquetoast kind of captain, commander, and then as it went along, he got to have that attitude.
Yeah.
And when he got the attitude, and actually there's one show that one episode that he did. It was basically him working with Garrick to get the Romulans into the Dominion War on the Alliance's side, on Starfleet's side. And basically what they had to do was Garrick had to assassinate this guy. But it's this very interesting episode because it's like Sisko doing this. He's talking to a camera, doing his log, and then it has the cutscenes for it. But it was actually one of the great shows because it's just him being good at what he does.
Yeah. And I'll say this. I have always had tremendous affection for this might be a better discussion later in the summer of representation. I think there could be a discussion we have to have about representation in these comic books and in these films. Star Trek has always, from the very beginning, tried to make that front and center. When you think about just who was on the deck in the 60s was so groundbreaking. I thought Enterprise still also did that as well. Star Trek has always been a place where persons of color are empowered and intelligent and seen as capable, where women are featured as leaders who are more than just objects of affection and flawed, deeply flawed. I think Dax is a really great example of how unpredictable femininity can be when it's in an alien form, and how you can't just put it into one,
Oh yeah,
because of what Dax is in terms of a host. I think Star Wars probably struggled with that more because of Leia was an empowered heroine. I think some people were a little hard on Star Wars in terms of Rey getting a lot of hate and Rose getting hate, but Star Trek seems to be a little more generous. Let's pivot on that note and talk about fandom. Let's take about 10 minutes to talk about fandom. And let me ask you a question, and then if you want to ask me a question, you can. So first of all, why do people love Star Wars and Star Trek? Let's start with a positive instead of piling on all the trolls.
Who so deserve it. I think a lot of it, I think it's storytelling, but it's also, when if you think about it, it's when you're exposed to it. We were exposed to Star Trek and Star Wars when we were kids, and so therefore, and yeah, a lot of the visual effects and the aliens and all that, it wows you, and then as you get older, you start to appreciate the story more than just the effects and the action. And I think that's a lot of it. Because, it's just with that thing, it's with anything. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, in the 90s. Or Power Rangers. It's like when you get exposed to it, you become a fan of it. And then if it actually has something to it, then it can actually last for longer than 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. I'm with you. And I would add to that both of these bodies have a cross-generational appeal. In that when Star Trek came out, adults had gravitated to it because we were in the space race. We're in the middle of the Cold War. Vietnam is really a buzzkill for everyone. And here, you have a competent, confident, multi-ethnic, literally multi-species, if you want to, say, Spock.
Yeah.
Half Vulcan, half human. And you have this ship of positivity. And there's always going to be consequences. Mostly it's the red shirts, and whoever Kirk had made out with. That's the two death.
Although it's funny because that is actually somewhat of a misnomer as far as the red shirts go. Actually, they didn't start killing red shirts till about the middle of season 2. Prior to that, everybody was on the table.
Yeah.
They were killing gold shirts, blue shirts, red shirts, everybody. And then it's like, finally decided, okay, we're just going to kill the red shirts.
Yeah, because it was just easier to do. Let's be honest, they're pretty useless, and it's weird who's a red shirt in Star Trek.
Well, it's the security guys.
Yeah,
you said the security guy. You're not going to kill a main character, but if you got to kill somebody to increase the tension, well, kill a security guy.
Yeah.
He's an extra. He's fine.
Yeah. I did appreciate that about the Abrams reboot, that Kirk's in a red shirt early on and realizes, he's in a little peril.
Right.
Literally, he's in peril because of his peril. So, and I thought that reboot was wonderful. I hope they can get to a fourth one. I didn't like.
They are talking about doing a fourth one.
Yeah, I hope they do.
They at first thought that he was going to go off and do his own thing, but I think they talked to him. I think he's actually going to go back and use that cast, and then do a fourth one.
I hope they do. So I think you're right. I think the other thing is, Kirk, they both tap into what I call infinite possibilities, especially with the toys. That helped a lot. But knowing you can go in the backyard and go on an away mission in Star Trek, or you can go in the backyard and you can have a Hoth battle or an Ewok battle.
Yeah.
And that they're ensemble based. I think that has always helped them. The fact that, my daughter loves Kirk or Spock. So I'm sorry. She loves Spock. She just loves.
She loves Kirk. She's going to die.
Yeah. She loves Spock. So her favorite Spock. I know if any of our friends are watching this, I have some who love Janeway. You love Cisco. Would you say Cisco's your favorite? Who's your 1, 2, 3 as a fan?
Probably it would. Well, of course, it has to be Captain Kirk, because again, I grew up on the original series. Cisco would have to be number 2 and 3. Honestly, just from one season and doing the new show, Anson Mount as Captain Pike.
Yeah,
because he is awesome as Captain Pike.
Yeah, I do like that they gave him the vision of what's going to happen to him.
Yes.
And he goes ahead and goes, well, I guess that's going to happen.
Do it.
My 1, 2, 3 unapologetically is Kirk, Spock, and Bones. I'm a huge.
Oh, I thought you were doing captains, not necessarily characters. Okay, that's fine.
Well, captains. Okay, if I did captains, then I'd have to go Kirk. I would go ahead and go Picard, and then I would do Sulu, because I love that Sulu kept trying to go be a captain, and then
or you could even do the off characters, because some of my favorite characters weren't necessarily in Starfleet. Garrick from Deep Space Nine, Quark from Deep Space Nine, and Harry Mudd.
Yeah, my non. Well, Q, to me, Q is one of the greatest.
He's always good too, yeah.
Q is in the Mount Rushmore of most interesting characters ever on Star Trek. But that's another discussion of the perfect character having a perfect foible. Q is to Picard what the Joker is to Batman, I would say.
True.
Okay, Star Wars, top 3 characters. We won't go captains because it's hard to keep track of.
So what's my parameters? In
okay.
film?
Just go films and Clone Wars, the animated version. Stay out of the book world and stay out of expanded graphic novels, and just go with what we can see on a monitor.
I would probably go with Vader, Fett, and probably Solo.
Vader, Fett, and Solo. Very good.
Well, yeah.
Good.
The people with the least amount of lines.
Well, Chewie could have, Chewie.
That's true. Well, in that case, it would have been R2 and Chewie.
R2 and Chewie, yeah, they had nothing to say. Mine unapologetically, I'm the old man saying, get off my lawn. Mine is Luke, Han, and Leia, just like it's Kirk, Spock, and Bones. But so, one of the things, one of the reasons I thought about the show is I really love The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian is such a Star Wars story.
Yes.
And taps into some of the things about Star Wars that has always been really interesting to me, which is
it's a great Western.
Yeah, it is. And I love Westerns. I love the spaghetti Westerns of Eastwood. Is that the pre-Beskar?
No, this is The Mandalorian.
No, has he got pre-Beskar armor? He's not.
Yes.
Silver?
I think so.
Yeah. All right, we've got 5 minutes. The state of fandom. Okay.
Let me put it this way: which franchise do you think is healthier at right now, Star Trek or Star Wars? And why?
Healthier right now.
Yes.
I think the most positive energy today is Star Wars because of The Mandalorian, not because of the sequels. I think The Mandalorian and the last half of the Clone Wars, where Ahsoka Tano and Rex get sort of their, not closure because they had it in Rebels, but they, by wrapping up the Clone Wars and introducing the Mandalorian, I think that scrubbed out a lot of the bad juju that fans have thrown at the sequels. Maybe more so than Trek. And I think if Trek had come out with a fourth one with Christopher Pine and Zachary Quinto and Judge Dredd and I can't remember, it's Carl Urban, and I think it would have been Trek. If you'd asked me last year, I would have said Trek. What do you think?
I still think it's Trek.
Yeah.
I think they've got more momentum. They've got, this third season of Discovery is, I think, done. They're just waiting to release it. Picard has got a second season order already. They're going to do a show with Pike. They're talking about doing a show with Captain Giorgio, the Mirror Universe version, which would be really entertaining. Plus, they're talking about already a fourth movie. Whereas, again, I think with Star Wars, you still have everybody's like, oh, the sequels were bad. Oh. And again, it's like, I guess some of it is like, I guess it's kind of funny because, Star Trek fans pick on, like mistakes and like deck numbers, and Star Wars fans go after the actors.
Yes.
So, I think there's kind of a difference there. Star Trek people go after, like little technical screw ups, not try to, run the actors out of Hollywood, which is kind of what has happened to Star Wars. That happened with
I would agree.
Jar Jar, kind of happened with Hayden Christensen, with some of the new people.
Yeah, I would. Yeah. Okay. Well, if that's the argument, Star Wars fans can really be the worst humans, which is surprising because I don't understand why the 10-year-old kid in you would. Well, maybe the 10-year-old kid in you always wanted to be Emperor Palpatine and Vader, even though you thought of yourself as Han Solo and Luke. Maybe maybe on the inside you're just a fascist like the Empire.
Well, and I think some of it too is that, okay, in Star Trek, it seems like there's always been more interaction with the fans and actually, because again, they've got novels, and they said right off they're not canon. There's people that were doing, they do their own stories. They've tried to do a fan film. There's all this kind of stuff that's always kind of, Star Trek has always seemed to be more open to, kind of coming in and playing around in the sandbox, whereas Star Wars has always been it's almost like it's very closed.
Yeah.
And, like
probably more in the past, though, because now it seems like the Disney executives realize that Star Wars is untenable if you just make it a Skywalker story.
Oh,
yeah. It seems like what they did with Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau, who are two men who should be revered. It seems like they're starting to just take the things that work in Star Wars and do with it what I think some of the best artists did with Star Trek, which was universe building, which probably that has to be a discussion we have, universe building.
Star Wars, The Old Republic.
I know you'll have a lot of thoughts on that if we get into discussions about things like Game of Thrones, universe building, things like that. Well, Listen, we're just about out of time. What other discussion should we have this summer?
Well, I think your world building is pretty good. Obviously, we need to talk comic books at some point. We could even talk video games.
We could do that.
All a different type of fandom. So, or how, the effects of other genre, effects of like how Star Trek has influenced other things in Star Wars and vice versa. We can go into all kinds of different things. we could even take suggestions from hopefully an audience at some point, maybe.
They would have
if somebody
watched.
watches
I don't know.
it. If somebody watches it.
I literally hate technology. And yet, in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, they could do this really easily. And clearly after World War III, the Federation figured this technology out. So we live in a time, after a long time ago and before the future, and it just don't work. So
that's true. It's all broke.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all the time we have. And thanks for joining us on this would have been live discussion.